So we've been talking about security planning and management. There are many sort of different pieces that make up this whole process of planning and then managing that security. How do we bring it all together? If you're going to go explain this to someone in a few minutes, what are the things you should be talking about? Well, first of all, you're going to say that there are things that are of value which are at risk. Okay? Maybe your reputation, maybe your intellectual property. There are assets that are of value which are at risk. So then you're going to talk about the risk comes from certain threat sources. Not only there are bad guys out there, of course, we have certain vulnerabilities. Those are the attack vectors. That's why those threat sources would be able to do us harm. That's why we need to worry about. The risk comes from the fact not just because we have something of value, but that thing could be harmed or could be breached. So the threats and attack vectors, really talking about threats and vulnerabilities. Together they come together, result in an attack. So an attack then leads to a breach, and that's where we have the adverse consequences. So if we have that, we had to talk about things that are of value. We have to talk about threats. These two are the reasons that help us explain that there is something at risk and the amount or level of risk that we may have. And the way to manage that risk is to plan for security, implement whatever controls that are meaningful, and then sort of manage that in terms of controls, people, processes, and things like that. And all that has to be done. Again, these controls that we're talking about, of course, we have to look at the cost, the benefits they offer, what impact they have, how user-friendly they are, things like that. So we have to sort of look into the controls that we have, what their effectiveness is. Then we have to identify people. It's their job to worry about security. We have to empower them to do it. They have to have the budgets. They have to be able to have policies that can be enforced and things like that. And those people have to be held responsible and accountable, because we know that if something goes wrong, they should be called to answer what exactly happened. And no matter how well you do that, we have to plan for something going wrong. And when something goes wrong, a response is going to be needed. Remediation has to happen. There shouldn't be any surprises. We should be prepared and have a plan in place saying if something bad were to happen, this is how we're going to respond to it. Of course, people, as we said, need to be aware of the importance of security, the guiding principles, the do's and don'ts, all the things that we're talking about under security policy. So we need to think about that. And finally, we need to understand, and people have to recognize, that a proactive posture is what gets you ahead of the threats in some sense. Threats change continuously. If you just are going to be in reactive mode, something new is going to come and hit you, and you're going to suffer the same sort of thing that you did before. So proactively addressing the risk and the threats and the vulnerabilities and having a champion to do that is another part of this security planning and management that we're talking about. Overall, understand what is of value, why there's risk to it, which is the threats and the vulnerabilities that we're talking about, and then plan, implement, manage, and do that all proactively. That's sort of bringing it all together when it comes to security planning and management.